that it is on the hour, I believe it is time for us to begin the event. So I shall say thank everyone for coming to the Importance of Student Interchange in a Post-COVID World. During this event, we will be having a Q&A chat available to the audience members. Feel free to type your questions as you see presenters go, and we will answer them as they come, or the panelists themselves will address them later during the evening. First up, I would like to introduce our ISC and USHCA representatives. First up, we have Miss Min Fan, who was born in China and studied at Peking University before immigrating to the United States. Prior to joining the U.S. Heartland China Association, Miss Min Fan launched U.S. China Now, a not-for-profit endeavor which partnered with a broad spectrum of organizations to build a bridge of understanding across the cultural divide between the U.S. and China. And Ms. Bahia Simmons Lane is the current executive director of the International Student Conference, ISC. Prior to this, Ms. Simmons Lane held the position as executive director of the nonprofit organization, the U.S. Japan Exchange in Teaching, or JET program, Alumni Association for 4 years. Please listen to their opening remarks.
Oh, Bahia, would you like to go first?
It doesn't matter. You can go first. She introduced you first. Please go ahead.
Sure. Well, thank you. Greetings from China. For personal reasons, I'm actually currently in Xi'an, China. I'm really, really excited about this program because, as Bahia knows, when I first was introduced to ISC, I was so impressed of their decades of work, cultivating leaders between the U.S. and the Japanese student community, then the U.S. and the Korean student community. So when they launched the CHESCA, I was so impressed. We became a partner on day one, and we have seen many students become executive committee members, participants, and so this synergy we have between our student program, which recruits interns, supports student leaders like Junlong and Tara, some of the, actually we have two of them right here today. We had Dora Meng, originally from Hong Kong, and we also have Junlong, originally from China. So again, this community of student leaders is why we're here. We want to make sure you know the resources available, the unique programs available for you. I personally, as you heard, I came from China as a student, and I feel very privileged to be able to have a unique experience coming from a culture from the East and be educated in the West. And there's so much to be learned today, continually. The two countries, our world need to be more open-minded, learn from each other. So really, really honored to work with Bahia, work with IC to introduce more resources and unique program. And that's coming up for the students. So with that, I'll turn back to Bahia.
Thank you so much, Min. I'm also very excited that this webinar is finally coming to fruition. When I met Min almost 2 years ago now, we talked about this idea, and now it is happening. So I'm very excited. And I just want to say to the audience and everybody who's here tonight that I extend a warm welcome to you for joining us for this webinar, The Importance of Student Interchange in a Post-COVID World. We are extremely grateful for the U.S. Heartland China Association for co-hosting this event with us. We really admire their commitment to the important work of building people-to-people bridges in the pursuit of a more collaborative and mutually beneficial relationship between the Heartland region and the people of China. Thank you as well to YANG Qianye, Peggy Blumenthal, our student panelists from USHCA, and our ISC team members, Vincent from CHASC Executive Committee, and our interns Hanwul and Chrislyn for joining us today to discuss the importance of fostering international education and cultural exchange. I want to tell you a little bit about our organization. ISC is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting peace through friendship, trust, and mutual understanding via international student interchange. We take pride in facilitating 4 important programs: the Japan America Student Conference, JASC, the Korea America Student Conference, CASC, the China America Student Conference, CHASC, which you'll hear about today, and the U.S. Japan Korea Trilateral Forum. With a legacy dating back to 1934, JASC stands as the oldest student exchange between the U.S. and Japan, and the success of JASC inspired the launch of CASC in 2008 and CHASC in 2020. Our mission at ISC is to promote peace by furthering mutual understanding, friendship, and trust through international student interchange. While the term student exchange is more commonly used, we like to use the term student interchange when referring to our programs, because rather than sending students from one country to another, we bring together students from 2 different countries for an intimate academic and cultural experience through which they learn from each other, make deep people-to-people connections, and form lasting friendships. Through panel discussions featuring leading professionals, collaborative research initiatives, and cultural field trips, among others, our program participants grow professionally and personally and contribute to the overarching goal of global harmony. One thing that is especially unique about our conferences is that they are organized by teams of student leaders, and at the conclusion of each year's conference, the executive committee members are elected by their peers to plan and execute the next summer conferences. These individuals are nominated and chosen because of their cross-cultural communication skills, leadership, and other great qualities. Within our programs, the students are able to delve into bilateral topics and deepen their understanding of international perspectives. They also form lifelong friendships, and this prepares these students to help realize a better future for everybody. Today's event will build on our long history of these student programs, and the collaboration with U.S. Heartland China Association really brings an additional depth to this discussion. Our diverse panel will feature students from the community and representatives in educational policy and the Chinese government, which really embodies the spirit of our organization's vision and our hope for a better future. I really like to thank everybody for being here tonight, not just the speakers, but everybody who's here in the audience. I think your presence really underscores the significance of our shared commitment to international education and cultural exchange. And we're going to work together to build bridges that will span continents and foster a world where students are not just the beneficiaries of knowledge, but also are architects of a more interconnected understanding and harmonious future. So thank you all for being with us today.
If I may, I just want to say about here, now you can see why I was so impressed when I was first introduced to ISC. But I also want to take opportunity because I did forget to acknowledge Madam Yang, because I didn't see her. So one thing that's really unique about Heartland China Association is that we have been able to building a lot of exchanges, education, culture, and business for our community, not only for college students, but high school. One of our big partner is the education section team at the Chinese Embassy in Washington, D.C. So we have had the fortune to meet with the Minister Counselor, the Counselor. They actually traveled to quite a few Heartland University, including HBCU, to understand their interests to exchange with Chinese universities. So thank you, Madam Yang, to be here, and I'll hand it back to our moderator.
Thank you so much for both of y'all's kind remarks. I would now like to introduce our next speaker, Madam YANG Qianye. Madam Yang is the 3rd Secretary in the Office of Educational Affairs at the Chinese Embassy in Washington, D.C. We would like to thank the Chinese Embassy for joining us today to discuss this important topic. Madam Yang.
Thank you, Chrisley. Dear Director Ming Fan, it's a pity that we haven't had chance to meet in person yet. And Councillor Zhang would like to extend his greetings to you. And also, dear Director Bahir Simon Slang, I think this year, the ISC program also visited the embassy very successfully. And dear colleagues, teachers, and students, good morning and good evening. My name is YANG Qianye from the Education Office of the Chinese Embassy. I'd like to thank the U.S. Heartland China Association and International Student Conferences for organizing such a great event. Thanks for having me today. The topic of the event is very meaningful as we see the pandemic during the past 3 years impeding student mobility and certain frictions in bilateral relationship shadowing people-to-people exchanges. Yet in every challenge, there is opportunity. Through all kinds of uneasiness and turmoil, we see how educational exchanges have contributed to the thriving development of both China and the US. So in this regard, a brief retrospect on the past may help us see the future better. China-US educational exchange has had a prosperous and fruitful history. Since the normalization of China-US relationship more than 4 decades ago, promoting educational exchange has been a well-established consensus between the two governments, especially during the period between 2009 and 2017. We have witnessed a staggering growth in both-way educational exchange. The annual growth rate for Chinese students in the US was 20 to 30%. At its peak time, there was around 370,000 Chinese students studying in the US, while during the same time, the US also launched the 100,000 strong program as a token of commitment to channel more US students to study in China. At its peak time, more than 21,000 US students traveled to China to study. This is how deeply the two countries are connected in terms of educational exchange. But in recent years, we have saw a reverse trend in this area, which gave rise to risks of educational decoupling between the two countries. From the 2018 China Initiative to the presidential promulgation in 2020, we have seen suspicion toward researchers and students based on their nationality. Although the US government claimed previously that the measure would target only 1% of all Chinese students, but as the number tell us, the chilling effect could be a lot more far-reaching. The newest open door report from IIE released last November shows the 3rd consecutive drop in the number of Chinese students in the US. And I believe Peggy from IIE will cover this later. But all this adverse inclination may do damage in the long run. We could not bear the cost to have a younger generation grow up in isolation or having much mistrust and misunderstanding toward each other. As a matter of fact, Chinese institutes are indispensable partners of US universities at the international level. Massive student and faculty mobility, numerous cooperation agreements, and joint programs expanding almost all fields of study. In many areas of scientific research, cooperation with China is not only an attractive option, but also an essential necessity. Data on international co-publication indicate that in 2021, co-publication with Chinese partners make up 10% of all co-authored papers in the US, making China the single most important research partner for the US. This interdependency also stands true for China. Moreover, close collaboration between China and US in academic fields implicates global significance. The many common challenges we face, like climate change, can only be solved by the research power of the two countries combined. Therefore, during the meeting last month in San Francisco, both President Xi and President Biden agreed to expand educational, student, youth, cultural, sports, and business exchanges. It is our historical responsibility to push forward the frontier of human knowledge and usher in a new era of prosperity. So in this endeavor, China-US educational exchange will continue to play a vital role. And there are certain principles both our sides shall uphold. Firstly, I think promote a more balanced reciprocal flow of students and scholars. I myself had the privilege to visit many American universities, and every place I go, I could feel the leadership's strong support for international exchanges, of which China-US exchange makes up a substantive portion. From time to time, I also hear concerns from the universities about the imbalance in students and faculty mobility, with too few American faculties and students traveling to China. Pandemic is of course a reason, and we have also received concerns about the travel advisory to China, which is level 3 right now, that is reconsider before you travel. And China always welcome international students from all over the world. Last November in San Francisco, President Xi announced that China is ready to invite 50,000 young Americans to China on exchange and study programs in the next 5 years. And we, the embassy, also has launched the American Short-Term Study in China initiative. We call it ASCII, in the hope that we could invite more American students to study in China. And secondly, I think we should adhere to the value of open research. Open research is academic work for the purpose of publication. It covers a vast majority of university research activities and the foundation of knowledge and innovation for all mankind. The whole system is based on principles of access to existing scientific publication and data, with the free flow of ideas and information. Restricting free collaboration in open research stagnates progress by preventing researchers to peer review, build on or challenge each other's work. No party could gain anything to conduct open research in secrecy. And thirdly and lastly, strategic planning and long-term commitment. Apart from student and faculty exchange, joint institutes and programs are another major form of partnership between the two countries. Right now, to my knowledge, there are more than 370 joint institutes and programs between China and the US. In many cases, those programs and institutes well served as platforms for deeper and more rewarding partnership, but also entails deliberated planning and devotion of enormous resources from both parties. We would very much love to see development in this field and commit ourselves to facilitate both existing and new partnerships. It is our firm belief that through continuous innovation programs, new models will emerge and take us to the next level. So I'm very much looking forward to the case studies and discussion in the following sessions. Thanks again for your attention. Thanks, Chrislyn.
Thank you so much, Madam Yang. Now we will hear from Miss Peggy Blumenthal. Ms. Blumenthal is a senior counselor to the CEO of the Institute of International Education in the USA. Ms. Blumenthal has had a long career in promoting student exchange at universities, think tanks, and nonprofit organizations. Thank you so much, Ms. Blumenthal, for taking the time to offer insight into this pertinent issue.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And I want to thank Madam Yang for giving us the kind of broad historical framework so that I can perhaps be useful by adding the data about what's happening right now in terms of U.S. China student exchanges. And I'm going to be using slides that have been developed from IIE's research project called Open Doors. Back in 1920, believe it or not, we started collecting data on international students in the United States. And even at that time, China was always among the top 5 sending countries to the United States. So when Madam Yang said there's a long history, she was indeed right. We'll focus now mostly on the period since normalization. And as you'll see in my first slide, which my colleague will bring up. Yes. The first slide shows the top 5. I'm hearing a little bit of background noise. Anyway, I hope you don't hear the background noise. The top 5 places of origin, the top 5 countries from which international students come. You can see that in 2021, 22, China was number 1. And again in 22, 23, China was number 1. India has very substantially increased the number of its students coming to the United States, whereas China has stayed more or less level. Next slide, please. Can we bring up the next slide? Yes. So what in this slide, I want you to see the pattern in terms of different academic levels. For many, many years, Chinese graduate students came to the United States in the largest numbers back in the 1980s, 1990s, even the 200s. And then we saw a big surge in Chinese undergraduates coming to the United States. And as you see, the undergraduates, which are the light blue line, peaked much higher than graduate students, but then during the pandemic really dropped off very sharply. And that was primarily because the borders were closed in both directions. But graduate students who are often here for PhD programs, many of them were here before the pandemic and stayed on in the United States during the pandemic. And now we've started to see those numbers, the graduate student numbers, actually start to rise after the pandemic and after it was possible to travel to the United States. So those when you combine those two figures, the undergraduate students from China and the graduate students from China, you get the roughly 290,000 Chinese students in the United States. The pitiful line at the very bottom of the chart, the purple line, shows U.S. students in China. And as Madam Yang said, there was a period when there were substantial numbers of American students going to China. I think, as she said, it peaked at, I think, in the 20,000s, but that's not very substantial compared to the number of Chinese in the United States. There's always been way more international students coming to the United States from all countries of the world than there have been Americans studying abroad. And then, of course, during the COVID years, the number dropped down to practically nothing. This data from the US students stops in 2022 because when we collect the data, we wait until the students come home back to the United States and receive credit for their work abroad. So what we're looking at in 2022 is still essentially the end of the COVID period. And there were only 211 American students in China, most of them in those joint university programs such as NYU Shanghai, Duke Kunshan, and the Schwarzman program with Tsinghua. Next slide, please. Now, bring it up to the current period, which is the fall of 2023, we did a snapshot survey of campuses and asked them what the changes were in their enrollments. We won't have the formal total open doors numbers ready until this next summer, but this was just kind of a snapshot survey. And what you see is that 34% of the campuses that responded showed increased numbers of students from China. 23% showed no substantial change, and 41% showed a decrease in students from China. That 41%, again, is heavily undergraduate. Universities and colleges that primarily received undergraduates did see a drop-off in those numbers. But when you add the right-hand two slices of the pie, basically it's over 60% of these responding campuses saw no change or an increase. Next slide, please. So then we asked the campuses, what has been the problem in terms of attracting more students from China from their perspective? And as Madam Yang said, of course, there was the pandemic. There was also problems, political tensions between our two countries, various other concerns that parents and graduate students had. But what they did say this fall, is that many of them intend to do in-person recruiting again in China, that during the COVID years, they were not able to send anybody to recruit in China. And it makes a big difference if your university can show up and meet with students and parents. So as you see on the left-hand side, the undergraduate recruiters said that, again, most of them will be heading to India, but many of them, at least over half, will still also be heading to China. The top recruiting goals, target countries, were India, Vietnam, recruiting from international students who are already at US high schools, South Korea, and then China and Brazil. At the graduate level, again, India will be the very first target for recruiters because so many graduate students from India have started coming in very large numbers. But the second highest target area, 46% of the respondents said they would tend to go and recruit in China for graduate students, and so on. Next slide, please. I wanted to address the concern that many Chinese students have that it's almost impossible to get a visa, that the student visas there's many, many more denials than acceptances, and there's no point even trying to come to the United States. And this just flatly is not true. In fact, in this past summer of 2023, over 300,000 student visas were issued globally, and 25% of them were issued to Chinese students. As you can see in that pie on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we show the difference between the number of students visas issued in China in the summer of 22 and the number issued in summer of 2023. And you can see that there was almost a 50% increase, that over 70,000 visas, F1 visas, were issued to students this summer in China. And indeed, if you look at overall, over the whole year, I said that in the summer, 300,000 visas were issued globally to students. When you look at the whole year from last January to this December, over 600,000 student visas were issued. And again, about a quarter of these going to Chinese students. So clearly there are an awful lot of Chinese students who are getting visas. The numbers that are denied, there certainly are some that are denied, some because students either didn't have the level of English, didn't have the financial ability, didn't have a clear plan in terms of coming back to China afterwards. But the way more students, large percentage more are awarded visas than are denied visas. And finally, let me get my last slide, which looks at how America stands compared to other countries that the Chinese students are studying in. And it's true that many countries welcome Chinese students, but the United States still remains by far the leading host for Chinese students. And again, we're looking at 2023. The United States hosted close to 290,000 students. The UK, which is the second largest host, hosted 158,000. Australia also hosted close to over 140,000, and so on. Japan hosted a large number. Canada hosted a large number. But the United States, I think, remains the destination of choice. Many students who are not able to come to the United States will also look to other countries. Many parents, particularly if they're sending undergraduates, are more eager to keep them closer to home, so might look to Australia, Japan, and so on. But our doors remain very much open to Chinese students in the United States. As Madam Yang said, both President Biden and President Xi announced at their summit in San Francisco that they strongly encouraged more student exchanges. And there are many programs through which Americans can study in China and Chinese students can study in the United States. And I'm happy to answer any questions later, but I just wanted to reiterate that our doors are very open to Chinese students and scholars, and we increasingly try to encourage Americans to study abroad. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blumenthal, for that informative overview of the current data on the exchange between these two countries. I would like to remind everyone once more that our Q&A is always open during these presentations, and you can ask any of our panelists anything, and we will either address it now in chat or later towards the end at Q&A. Finally, we'll be moving on to our student speakers. First up, we have Vincent Lei, who will talk about the China America Student Conference. Vincent is a graduate student at ASU, currently studying industrial design, and is one of the executive committee members organizing the fourth CHAST for this year. Vincent, please go ahead.
Thank you, Kristen. Let me just get it started here. All right, is it working? I hope it's good. Okay, my name is Vincent. I'm currently one of the executive committee members planning the 2024 China America Student Conference. The China America Student Conference, like Bahia said, is one of the 3 programs offered by international student conferences. This one is obviously focused on the U.S. China relationship. The conference was originally established in 2020, but due to global circumstances, the previous year's conference, or technically this year's conference, the 2023 one, was the first fully in-person conference. What makes CHAST kind of unique is that it's a very concentrated program So unlike traditional study abroad programs that may last a semester or even a year, CHASC is a 2-week intensive where delegates will live and learn together throughout the entire duration. It requires a little bit less commitment in that regard, so it's a little bit more manageable if you have current obligations wherever you are. The conference itself is comprised of a delegation made up of both Chinese and American students. This doesn't specifically mean that you have to be from China, America, though, but rather you are representing those perspectives. So don't feel obligated to necessarily be ethnically or natively from those places. So what does the conference actually offer you? The first thing is team or research experience. So the academic focal point of the conference is the roundtable group. Essentially, this is a topic that delegates research over the course of the conference with their fellow delegates, which culminates in a final form research presentation. These roundtable topics are pretty varied due to the diverse nature of the conference, and delegates apply to the roundtable of their choice when applying for the conference. So, for example, this year's roundtable topics include like culture, history, education, foreign relations, and policymaking. You'll also get a deeper understanding of U.S. China relations, as you might expect. So last year we had visited both the State Department and the Chinese Embassy, which gave us an in-depth look at both sides of the U.S. China relationship. And it was very interesting to hear what each side said in regards to that relationship, especially when we asked the same question. So you get a really candid and deep dive at each department's perspective. You'll also get professional networking. As mentioned, some of the places we visit are departments of state, but we also visit places like the Asia Group, which is a business advisory firm that helps organizations strategize in the Asian markets. So this offers a little bit of a different insight into the bilateral relationship because the US and China relationship itself is so heavily defined by mutual economic interests. So if you're someone who's not as interested in working on the political side of things, there are other avenues that the conference can provide you. Cultural immersion. Yes, unfortunately, since CHASC can't go to China currently, it does take place stateside. So that doesn't mean the conference doesn't intend to go to China in the future. It does, but obviously for American delegates right now, you won't exactly be immersed in a new culture. But for those on the Chinese delegation, this is obviously still a chance to experience American culture. But for the American delegates, it's a pretty unique opportunity to practice like diplomacy via hospitality. I mean, obviously a big appeal of student interchange usually involves traveling to a new place, but diplomacy is a two-way street, and CHASC can provide that opportunity for American delegates to showcase their culture on their terms. So last conference, we had students on the Chinese delegation who had never been to the US in general, and obviously they wanted to see, famous tourist spots and famous locales, but we also got to show them places that were a little bit less known. So you'll have an opportunity to sort of show your America, in your authentic manner. You'll also get hopefully lifelong friendships. 2 weeks, kind of may seem like a short amount of time, but because you spend all of it together, you really have an opportunity to connect with the people here. I was actually fortunate enough to have someone in the delegation live in my state, so I still see them pretty regularly. And I even had a Chinese delegate also come visit me for about a week. So, don't underestimate how long 2 weeks actually may be. And this is a good segue into who leads the conferences. A major point of the conferences that ISC manages is that they're all student-led and organized. So this does mean that who's organizing the conference basically completed the past conference. So they'll know exactly what you're going through as well during the conference. And it's also a good way to continue your CHASC experience, as well as maintain contact with the friends you make at the conference. It basically changes your CHASC experience from, passive to active. So instead of just being a participant, you'll be an organizer, a leader. As for myself, it sort of functioned as a way for me to keep my foot in this world. I currently study industrial design, and my undergrad was in STEM. So like diplomacy and U.S.-China relations, they're not really in my periphery in my everyday life. So this was kind of a great way to stay connected in that regard on top of the, social benefits. That's not to say that planning the conference is necessarily a cakewalk, because it is a year-long task. But if you do choose to go that route, you will be organizing the conference with help from IC and of course your fellow delegates who also decide to take the lead. So let me finish up briefly by talking about the upcoming China America Student Conference for 2024, which will be the fourth one. This year's conference will take place in June from the 3rd to the 15th, and we'll be going to Chicago and then Washington, D.C. In general, Chicago is going to be the more economically and culturally focused site, whereas DC was going to be the more politically and diplomatically focused site. In terms of eligibility, this is pretty basic. You just basically need to be a university student, are going to be a university student, or recently were a university student. There is no language requirement, so that means that you do not have to speak Chinese or to participate. But the conference does basically operate in English, and I think nearly all the speakers and events that we go to, require English. So that having that level of comprehension is going to be pretty integral. But there is also no focus on any specific field. The conference is multifaceted, so of course we welcome all majors of study. Like I said, I'm industrial design and I studied STEM, so this is not something that is purely politically focused or something in that regard. Here is the QR code that leads to our application. Most of it is pretty standard boilerplate, but there are some short essay questions. However, they're up to 500-word max, so you don't have to write 500 words if you want to write succinctly or be brief. Yeah, it's up to you. And that is it.
Thank you so much, Vincent, for that lovely presentation over CHASC. Next up, we will have Dora and Junlong, and they will talk about USHCA and some of their educational programs. Dora is a current intern at USHCA and is an international student studying at the University of Michigan. Junlong is a former intern at USHCA and is currently studying at the University of Southern California.
Cool. Thank you, Kristen. Hi, everyone. My name is Dora. And like Kristen said, I'm an student studying at the University of Michigan. I'm here to just talk about the United States Heartland China Association. I've been interning here since September, so excited to talk more. So USHCA is a 501c3 nonprofit and bipartisan organization dedicated to fostering and strengthening economic and social ties between the American heartland states and China, standing at the forefront of promoting collaboration and understanding. As you can see, the heartland states are the states that are highlighted in dark blue on the screen. Our programs focus on trust building efforts to connect educational and community interests, as well as business leaders and local government leaders with like-minded institutions between the heartland region and China. So a lot of our work focuses on the trade and investment aspect. So we have a lot of agricultural tables. Recently, we had a mayor's delegation to China, which involved several American mayors that visited different cities in China. And deal because for a lot of these mayors, it was their first time in China. So it was great for them to kind of get to know Chinese culture, but also see how they can be economic partnership with these Chinese cities. And of course, we also have our Why China Matters to the Heartland annual report, which I will be talking about later. And we have the other side of also fostering social and cultural ties. We collaborate with a lot of universities, as well as having a Heartland Chinese Teacher Award. And some organizations we work with to facilitate all these events include the China General Chamber of Commerce, as well as the U.S. China Business Council. And speaking more about my experiences a lot of my main responsibilities include helping out with the Why China Matters to the Heartland report. I gather a lot of quantitative data on goods and services exported to China, as well as highlighting the less tangible social and cultural ties. I conducted a lot of media scans of these states that organize events that highlight Chinese culture and the presence of Chinese international students studying in these heartland states. And I do really think that this work is important just because I feel like a lot of national media discourse often overlooks or dismisses these states, when in reality, I found that a lot of them, especially, those local and state level, are very eager to build on US China relations. Um, as I mentioned, the mayor's delegation to China, all of them were constantly looking for opportunities to build on investments or collaboration opportunities when it comes to infrastructure projects as well. So, as an international relations student, it has been super rewarding to learn about each state's unique relationship with China. And, I've taken a lot of classes on Chinese economy and politics, and I don't think I've really gotten this sub-level, like this subnational perspective. So the work here has been a really good supplement for my classes. And it's really cool for students to work with an organization like USHCA if you're into kind of the intersection between research, business, building social ties from the ground up. A lot of the work that I've been doing kind of applies to a really diverse range of fields. And USHCA is a relatively small nonprofit, so the work is super hands-on. I think one week I was doing some translations, and then the next week I was researching like infrastructure projects between Oklahoma and China. So it really changes from day to day, because this work is really dynamic, really exciting, and it's just a reflective of the relationship between the heartland states and China. So that's all I have for you, and I will pass it on to Jinlo.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Junlong Wang. I'm the USHCA intern in the last summer, in the summer of 2023. I was working on the programming, educational aspect of the USHCA, and then I'm also the founder of the Bridge Cultural Exchange Academy at USC. So when I first heard of USHCA, the heavy emphasis and focus on student exchange is immediately draw me to this organization, because I feel like the student play a very unique and vital role in the field of diplomacy. When they go into different countries, they also bring in their own unique identity, story, and culture identity to the host country, to the host communities. So that's why I really like USHCA so much, because it has so many programs that support student exchanges and the educational components. So Alan, would you go to the next slide? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So USHCA has in its educational components, it has like two main program I'm working on. So it has like exchange program for college student, including student forum, the third space story circle, and also it has like program for K-12 students, like the pen pal projects. So no matter what the stage the student is in right now, we always have a program always for each student. So the student doesn't have to always commit to a full length like 2-hour program, or they can just write to each other on weekly basis to catch up, to check in with each other. So first, I want to talk about the pen pal project, which we just launched this year for students in K-12. Can you go to the next slide, Alan? Yeah. So in this program, we organize students from China and the United States to engage in online pen pal projects. The students do not meet with each other face to face, or they do not engage with each other online. So this offers students more flexibility to interact with each other. So they just write to each other on a weekly basis. So in this program, students will talk about their educational experiences, daily life, traveling experiences, or culture experience with students from United States and student from China. So we will offer the student with some guidance and some prompt for them to answer each week. But at the same time, we encourage those students to freely share their experiences. It's very it's very interesting because most of the participants, they are not typical international students. Most of them, they are not planning to go into America or going into study abroad in the short term. So I think this is a very important program to reach out to just local students, domestic students, instead of only focusing on international students who will eventually have the opportunity to study abroad. And then I really like this program because this showcases the spirit of grassroots exchange to reach to students where they are at instead of only targeting the international students. Next slide, please. So in this most recent program, we have 18 students participating, so 9 Chinese students and 9 American students. So the topic include like bridge building, cultural exchange, and global leadership skills. So as you can see on the map, this all over the students from all over China and mainly in the Heartland region of America. So when they finished, we were organizing feedback survey to get the students learning to get the data from all of those students. So right now, the student they mainly suggested they erase the cultural stereotype after completing this PEMPO program. And then we received the overwhelming positive feedback from the teachers. We eventually organized a post-event and get-together session between students, parents, and the teachers. So this is not only a program that lasts for a week for a summer, but we hope to facilitate a long-term friendship building community. Next slide, please. So in terms of the third space, this is for students who want to engage with each other live, who want to hear the story, the experiences of their peers from different countries. So the key goals is to foster a spontaneous and live discussion between students in different countries. So we will dive into the daily topic, the educational experiences. For example, the one we hosted most recently, we're asking students to share what's their most memorable childhood experiences in China and what's the most memorable childhood experiences in America, and then what's the most important culture tradition you are still practicing today. So we divide them into different small groups so they can share with each other in depth, and then we bring them back together to the whole group to share the experience with each other. I really like this program because in this program, the student need to repeat their counterpart's story instead of only repeating their own story when they are sharing to the whole group. One of the core skill I think we can all agree on when it's about building the bridge, it's the ability to be empathetic listener, to listen to other people, to be able to see beyond what their identity is, to be able to explore their own unique story and experiences. So this is the whole point of the third space. It's using the power of storytelling to facilitate the bond, to facilitate the understanding, offer students a lens to see each other as everyday students instead of, just Chinese, just Americans. Next slide, please. And then lastly, we have one student forums session. The student forum is a way for us to shorten the distance between leading experts and also everyday students, because often in time, the chance to interact with top leading experts is very rare for everyday student. So we decided to bring this expert to them to invite students to become a panelist in the discussion instead of just listening to professors. So in this student forum, we invited Professor Michael Sandel. He's the most influential modern philosopher, most influential living modern philosopher in the world. Then the topic is very universal, it's very relatable for Chinese and American students. So right now, I think in both China and America, we face the tyranny of meritocracy. We face the tyranny of meritocracy. Students are just blindly pursuing the reputation of a university instead of figuring out their passion. So we organized Professor Michael Sandel to interact with with 4 students from China and America on this topic. Yeah. Next. Yeah, next slide. So this is a slide for Professor Michael Sandel. Yeah, so and also we organize and also one of the core things that USHCA do is reaching out to local university to help students to interact with different student groups, to help students to interact immerse into local culture, to interact with local communities instead of just trying to bring in additional international students into this host community. So one of the very cool things that USHCA did for my student organization is that the strategic advisor of USHCA is willing to speak to my student organization and my student panelists. So we organize a student culture exchange summits to talk about the citizen diplomacy, the impact of citizen diplomacy. So because the student, when they live in foreign countries, sometimes they always tend to get together with stay in the comfort zone, get together with the people from the same cultural backgrounds, without realizing the power they have, the influence they have on diplomacy. They are their own unique cultural ambassador. So in this cultural exchange summits, we talk about how to empower students to become a citizen diplomats, to actively engage with the local community. So in short, I feel like the USHCA is put very heavy emphasis on how to get both domestic student, international student, and also future international student to involve in the world and involve in the communities, to talk to each other, to become the bridge that bridge the divides, to become a part of the movement that can facilitate the understanding instead of just like seeing each other as you are different than me, you are just American student, but I'm Chinese. So we are different, but we are trying to explore the synergy between students from different cultural backgrounds. That's the end of my sharings. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dora and Junlong, for that wonderful presentation about the USHCA and all the things that y'all are involved in. For this next portion, we will go into the Q&A session, which will be moderated by my cohort, Hanwoo Jung of ISC. Hanwoo, if you'll take over.
Thank you, Kristen. And also thank you so much again to Madam Yang and Ms. Blumenthal, and to all the student representative. This was like all very informative and extremely critical topic to discuss, as the students will become the next generation of leaders in these 2 countries who will shape the future of bilateral relationship in all different aspects. So before we begin with the question and answers, I'm just going to quickly go over the Q&A, how the Q&A session is going to proceed. So again, we are going to keep it simple and have everyone to just submit their questions in the chat box. And please try and keep the questions concise and clear. And finally, if you want to hear from a specific speaker, you can also state that along with your questions. So we do have first question from Tom Watkins, a former Michigan State Superintendent of Education. And he asks about the lessons future Chinese leaders might take away after coming to the United States as students and experiencing criticism and negative perceptions of China. What kind of programs at high school level could help improve this public perception of China?
Maybe I could just say one thing not about the first half of the question. And of course, our student representatives will have more to say, I think, about what the experience is on U.S. campuses. But for the most part, I think it's very widely true that once a student is on a U.S. campus, an international student, they receive a lot of support. The campus is a safe environment and a supportive environment, much more so actually in the United States. There's much more of a student services and student support network of professionals who are there to make sure that the students from China and from all over the world are not feeling threatened or anxious. Of course, in the news, the news media always picks up on, if there's one bad incident, and even one is way too many. But if there's one bad incident, that's all that goes off over the news media. And I think it's a problem, particularly for parents in China who may read about one incident and think that their own child may be at risk. But in fact, the vast majority of international students and students from China have a positive experience in this country. They learn both the good and the bad things about America, but they certainly go away with a much more in-depth understanding and I think a positive attitude toward their university experience.
Yeah, I would weigh in also that what's really interesting is despite all the government high-level meetings and what you read in the news, there's actually a lot of misinformation on both sides. And so especially on the Chinese side, people like to hear from people you know. So each student who are coming here or going there are actually unique tunnels, windows for both sides to get to know each other better. So the student I've met, they actually were really interested to see how the dynamic, even though polarized political rhetoric is out in the open, because it's very different. All the things that people are debating, arguing. So for them, it's very immersive to get to know what America is about. But fundamentally, I think each individual, like with Junlong, like Chrissy, the people in your community will get to know through your experiences.
Can I actually also jump in? I was thinking about this question as Junlon was speaking, and I feel like a lot of those types of programs are exactly the right types of programs to kind of, when people connect on a people-to-people level, one person to another person, that does a lot. It goes very, very far to change the way that people think about others or people who are different from themselves, people from countries that maybe they didn't have a previous experience before. So I think those types of, whether it's a pen pal program or just an opportunity to, for American students in high school to meet Chinese students and meet them on a personal level, that goes really far to kind of change how people relate and how people think. Rather than in an abstract way, it becomes a very concrete and real thing that, oh, I as a student met this other student and we were able to connect in a meaningful way.
I'll share a fun fact. We learned from one of the high school students in Missouri. She was so excited that her Chinese pen pal liked the same music. I wouldn't say who, but you can guess who the most popular musician they both like. But that was just really, again, she was like, oh, I'd love them to come visit me. I'd love to go visit them. So it's very different from the data we see, right? 211 versus. So I think there's something in there that we may have to go, as some of the speaker mentioned, that the learning maybe could be broader. You could go even high school.
I would also like to speak a few words because many of you mentioned about the media, because both country in the media, especially when Dora Meng shared her experience that many just understanding each other through media, but when you truly go there, and you will find it's totally different. So that is why from our side, and also and also the USHCA, that we all encourage the many programs like to encourage students to really be there and learn more, and you will find the true is totally different with the ones on you read on the media. So that's true.
Thank you so much. And we have another question from, sorry, one second. I think this is going to be an interesting question. So is there any advice for students of color planning on studying China in terms of finding a community and adjusting? I know Ms. Blumenthal also has answered this through chat, but if anyone else has suggestions or want to share opinions, please go ahead.
For some reason, I can't see Peggy's reply. Would you mind, Peggy, to reiterate a little bit what your reply was?
Sure, happy to do it. I just wanted to share again some data from Open Doors that we collect. And in the latest study abroad data in terms of Americans studying abroad shows that about 30% of the Americans who study abroad as undergraduates and come back and get credit are students of color. The largest percent actually are Hispanic students or students of Hispanic or Latino origin. And then also Asian students of Asian background, students of who are African American or multiracial. So it's gone steadily up. It's not high enough, I should say, because in fact, when you look at the overall composition of American undergraduates, it's closer to 50% are students of color now. So we still have a ways to go, but there are a lot of organizations that are working very hard to increase that percentage. IIE is one of them. We have a number of programs that we administer for the U.S. government, including the Gilman Scholarship Program, which I just wanted to point out. It's for students who are Pell eligible, in other words, financially needy, and over 50% of the hundreds of students who receive Gilman scholarships every year, over 50% are students of color. There's also every study abroad office will have, on campus, will have students who've come back from study abroad who have of diverse backgrounds who are willing to talk to you and explain, because it does look scary to, you go into a different country, what they're going to think of you, what it's going to be like. But I think that there's a lot of ways to prepare for this, and study abroad offices are a good first start. And then I also put in the chat the name of an organization that's been created specifically to focus on increasing diversity among study abroad students, and it's called Diversity Abroad. And you can just Google it and find out more about it. It's been very active in trying to make sure that students of color feel fully entitled and able to study abroad and not worried.
And I would also like to add that thank you, Ms. Blumenthal, for your data, and I just found your answer. And I would also like that add that if the student would like to search opportunities, as I just mentioned, China welcome international students from all over the world, including United States, including students with color. And there's another channel that the Chinese government also offers scholarship. So students are always welcome to search online campuschina.org to search opportunities. There are plenty of Chinese universities offer many kinds of programs under the Chinese governmental scholarship.
Thank you so much, Madam Yang and Ms. Peggy, Ms. Blumenthal, sorry. We have another question, and I think this is also quite important to address. So one of the audience asked, does the exchange mean just the number of Chinese students studying in the US and vice versa, not strictly the exchange programs between the universities? I think it's important to just clarify for the other audiences as well. And also, I just like to add on top of that, do different governments have a different way of defining what this exchange means? And does different institutions also have the different ways as well. Thank you.
Well, I did type in the chat one answer, which is just kind of the technical answer, which is that the Open Doors data counts every student who is either studying in the United States or studying abroad for credit. And it's not just the school-to-school exchange programs. Most of the students who will go on these school-to-school direct exchanges often come on a J visa to the United States, but those students who are coming on an F visa, the international students, are count everybody who's in the United States as an international student on an F visa. So the data I gave about the numbers of Chinese students here, that was including everybody who's enrolled at a higher education institution, as well as people who may stay on after they graduate for optional practical training, because they're still on the student visa. So that's the technical answer, but you're absolutely right. Schools define it differently, governments define it differently. The last slide I showed was actually from our Project Atlas. And what that is was an effort to make a pool of data that is comparable, that we all agree to use the same definition. And that took us quite a few years to hammer out, to get Australia and the UK and United States and Japan and all the other, I think we have about 30 international partners, and we all put up our data on a thing called Project Atlas, and you can just Google that and get into it. But we all use the same definition for that particular thing. So that could be helpful. If you want to go on that site, you can see what the international accepted definition is.
Yeah, I also think Bahia had to clarify the interchange term versus exchange, because I do think what IC has is very unique. It's not on a J visa, on other visa, you had to make a 3 months commitment a semester. It's actually easier getting your toe in the water type experience, but so intense that it really could transform you. I think especially as we see such a gap between US student in China, Chinese student in the US, those short-term intensive program might be the way to go. I remember many conversations Bahia and we have had, because we both have program that ideally you have 50-50 from each country, but sometimes you have too many of this, another time you have too many of that. For very reason, it just sometimes I think we will just have to be made more creative. So Madam Yang, I think actually we were just talking to a couple HBCU who want to send some students to China in June for agriculture education exchange. We're talking about maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And does that qualify for scholarship? Does that qualify? What kind of visa can they get? Because sometimes they get a short-term visa, and then the next time they have to apply again, there's a hassle factor. So I do think that if we really want to make it easy for interchange, exchange, we will just have to be a little more open with the format. Sorry, Peggy, that might be the data gathering the more difficult because that might be hard to track down. But I still remember before the pandemic, we had planned 2 weeks for a group of Missouri high school girls. They were going to go to Beijing, spend 2 weeks to study the history, the culture, and the system they have as a result of history culture. We had to cancel all that. So there are a lot of things like that that's small, but get people to feel more comfortable. And I also agree with Madam Yang. When we took the mayor's delegation to China, they were like, hey, why is it level 3? I feel safer in China than Mexico. they were talking about, that doesn't really make sense. And so again, there are a lot of things that until you go, you're subject to just level 3. What do you think? So with that, I just think that again, the ISC program, the reason we're such a big fan of it, we actually have given scholarship to some of the Heartland students to participate, because we're realizing a lot of the Heartland community, they don't even know about this opportunity. And it was so unique when we went to China with the mayor delegation. They saw, one of the consulate diplomat who graduated from Alcorn University from Alabama, and they saw another one who also graduated HBCU, and they were really excited that a minority student can get international experiences and become a diplomat. So those were not aware to even to the we're talking about community leaders at the mayor level. So that's another thing. I think part of it about that the impact is, as I advocated, is we need to get the word out. that we may not be able to take 100 students, but the 10 students who participate can tell hundreds of people about this experiences.
Thank you so much, Min. I feel like you are just doing such an amazing job promoting our programs and talking about our programs. I am so appreciative. But, you know, to your point, I really think, you know, it's okay to start small, right? It's okay to have programs that are 30 people, 10 people, 50 people, right? Because with each individual that has a meaningful experience and develops deeper understanding of people from another culture, just changing one person's mind has a snowball effect and has a bigger kind of impact later. And there's also, I think, a lot of benefits to more intimate programs sometimes, because when you have a small group of students that are, like with our programs, traveling together, researching together, learning together, living together for 2 weeks, they have the opportunity to have a lot of like personal moments outside of the official programming. They have a lot of chance to really, you know, get to know people in a deeper way, I guess. And that, I think, has a really, really huge impact. We know with one of our Chinese students who participated last year that, you know, she not all of her family was excited about her coming to the US and participating in that program, but she had a really, really good experience, and then wanted to pay that forward, right? And continue to, you know, be engaged in US China relations. So I think that's just so important, that even if we start small and make incremental progress, there is progress being made.
But one more thing is, Madam Yang, I have actually suggested to Bahia that a future IC CHSCA should be in China. And so this is another idea. Again, I think, you know, it's great always have it in Chicago, in DC, but you're talking about Chinese students have to travel all the way here. So if you're trying to get more American students to go to China, why don't you have a CHSCA in China? So that's another thing that I think Bahia and Madam Yang and Peggy, you know, there's a new way of doing things. What I also like about IC program is the student leaders. Again, I need to, you know, mute myself because the students are driving the program. It's really impressive. So that's another thing that, you know, let them know that the world is open and both countries are potential hosting locations.
Yeah, just as you said, that actually the embassy is just acting as a bridge, not only the IC program, and we also welcome the program visit the embassy in 2024. And also, just like what I mentioned, the ASCII program, like the embassy launched the short-term program, we also acting like a bridge that connecting both the China institution and American institutions. And this program is like starting from 4 weeks to 1 year, and it's also faculty led, and students can get credit and full scholarship. What I mean is that we have these many opportunities, many programs, and just by doing step by step, it's better than doing nothing. So yeah, and I will quick answer the level 3. We are working very hard on that part with the American counterparts, the colleagues, and hopefully it will change, because we do have received many concerns from the American faculties and colleges that they have obstacles on this part. So we do hope to change that.
And I join you in sharing hope that level 3 warning will change. Just to point out to people who aren't familiar with that, this is not a warning specifically aimed at students or scholars. The State Department sets these travel warnings looking at business people, looking at, you know, all kinds of different issues. So it's not that easy, but I'm really glad that the Education Department is pushing for this, as we are as well. And I wanted to also say absolutely to Min Fan that we totally support short, intensive immersion for students there are many students who can't get away for a semester or a year. And if they can go on a faculty-led program for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, if they get credit for it back home, they will be counted in open doors. If they don't get credit for them back home, there are many students who go, but we have no way of counting them because they just go and they come back and they don't necessarily tell even their own campus. So that's why we only count ones that get credit. But absolutely, going abroad for a summer, going abroad for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 weeks, this data has shown, studies have shown that if you go abroad once, you're way likely to go abroad again for a longer period of time. So I totally agree. If we can get more young Americans at the high school level to go abroad and dip their toe in the water, that would be fabulous.
So, Hanwol, I hope you don't mind. I don't want to step on your toes, but I would like to ask a question for the student panelists, because we've been talking a lot about these people-to-people experiences. And I was hoping that maybe the student panelists could share maybe an experience that they have had through one of the programs we've talked about, or a different program that they felt was really meaningful in terms of developing a better understanding or building a bridge between the two countries.
Sure, yeah. I'd love to answer that question. I'm not sure about any specific programs, but I think coming from Hong Kong and like studying in the US, it was definitely like a big transition, but like there's so many resources on campus that have been really, really helpful. I believe that almost every university has like an international center and they have like specific advisors, whether you have questions about immigration or like sometimes if I don't get an advising appointment with my advisor, like I'll just turn to the international center and be like, well, what do you think about this class that I can take? Um, and I think also like I'm plans to study abroad as well. So it's kind of like double studying abroad. And they've also been really helpful in that. And I think switching it vice versa, like growing up in Hong Kong, being high school in Hong Kong, I feel like I would have benefited so much from a lot of these programs that we're talking about. Like if I had a pen pal in the US, like before I came here, I could like ask them, oh, like what's it like living here? I think that that would be really cool as well. So sad I didn't get to do that, but I think these programs like they're expanding and a lot of people are interested in it. So hopefully like the next generation or even now people are participating in it. Will get a sense of what it's like to be exposed to a completely foreign um, culture than their own.
Yeah, for me, it was a little bit of a little difference, I guess, for me, because when I joined the China America Student Conference, I sort of joined out of curiosity in general. I study industrial design, so my natural instinct was that this was going to be much more politically focused. I was surprised to learn that it wasn't that specifically. It was much more multifaceted of an experience. And I think also for me, it was, if you're someone who has only um, doesn't have that much experience with Chinese people, specifically, if it all comes from the media, you quickly realize that, these people, that any people in general are not a monolith. So, you really get these connections. And like I said, even though it's just 2 weeks, because you're together all the time, it really, you get a level of intimacy that you may not even get in a foreign semester abroad, where you're just in school with people. So it was very valuable. I mean, obviously, it inspired me to uh, move on to be an executive committee and change from a passive participant into an organizational position, and even thinking change potential like career plans as well. So it was a big deal for me, I guess.
Thank you, Baya, for putting the spotlight on the student representative, because since we have 5 minutes left, I wanted to bring this one of the pre-submitted question that is perfect for the student representatives to answer. So the question is, what should these students be working on at a campus level to help ensure that U.S. China educational and exchange programs last amidst the deterioration of the U.S. China relations? And I believe that this is going to be the final question of the day.
I think one thing that comes to mind definitely is we already, a lot of analysts have talked about this, but kind of like when you see a news article or you see a tweet talking about U.S. China relations and how it's been deteriorating, just like go one step further and kind of educate yourself, like different sources, give yourself more contextual information when you see like a blaring statistic that's, oh, maybe like 80% of Americans don't like China. Like that, there's, like I'm not saying anything specific about that, but it's important to kind of like educate yourself and like talk to people that you know. Always be more, I get, open-minded and kind of curious. I think that's the word that I would use. Like have a curious mindset, be eager to learn about China because it's such a diverse country. It's so rich in culture and history and food as well. So it's important to kind of like take the time to educate yourself more.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Dora. Yeah, so from my experiences of organizing campus-wide activity at USC, University of Southern California, so I think it's very, very important for students to have a very open mindset. So to step out of their own cultural comfort zone, because based on in my public diplomacy classes, the professor is talking about that so many international students, they just tend to stay in their own comfort zone and then just hang out with people with their own cultural backgrounds, instead of interacting with students from with other different races beyond the classroom. So then that itself is kind of, building up to the stereotype like about certain group, certain peoples. For example, like so many people are thinking like Chinese people or some like other Chinese students, they just like to stay together instead of knowing other cultures. But so I think for individual students, it's very important for them to actively break the stereotype. It's not only good for themselves. It's not only good for their own personal and professional development, but it also can contribute to a greater good. It's like breaking up the cultural stereotype to actively engage with the local communities, and then just engage with each other as human beings instead of have a predetermined mindset when interacting with other people from different races. So I think that's very important for students to work on at campus.
I know I'm not a student. I'm going to weigh in just one thing. One of the mayors who went on the delegation to China, her impression of China, Chinese people in general, weren't that nice before the trip, because she was saying that she had visited her local university. She had some interactions and they were pretty cold. So from that, she made a kind of general impression of Chinese people in general. Again, she definitely have a better understanding. That says a lot about each of the students. You represent the community you come from. So that's another thing. I think the journal has a good point, is that you are the window for a lot of people to see a much bigger world. So make sure the glass is clean so they get a good view.
Yeah, I would just say that, based on the discrepancy of how many more international students are in the U.S. compared to how many American students are in China, for example, that if you're, on campus in the States, you always have an opportunity to essentially be an ambassador. I mean, I know obviously that I think a lot of people kind of think diplomacy happens when you go to a foreign place. But practicing diplomacy via hospitality, gives you a chance to always be, an ambassador for your country, for other people here. So you always have that chance to be a citizen diplomat, even though it might not necessarily be as exciting as traveling to a foreign place. So I would just keep that in mind.
And with that, I apologize for cutting in, but we will end the Q&A portion here. I'd like to thank all of our guests and speakers for informing us about the historical context of the U.S.-China relationship, speaking to us about the importance of student exchange and what we're currently seeing going on in student exchanges, our student speakers for letting us learn more about different Chinese American conferences and what impact they've had upon you as a person and for educational purposes. And I'd also like to thank once more our attendees for coming and asking questions and learning more about the impact of COVID on student interchange between the United States and China. Thank you very much for attending and have a nice rest of your evening.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.